Well, good morning. I call y'all survivors because you've dropped them off and they're in school and you get an opportunity. So my most important job, I'm a lawyer. I practice law, so don't hold that against me, here in Birmingham at Lightfoot, Franklin and White. But I'm also a nonprofit president, so I kind of juggle two hats with the Hope Institute, and we help schools build a culture of character. So supporting education is very, very important to me, and you're going to learn a little bit why as we get a chance to visit this morning. But most importantly, I'm a mom. So I understand what it's like to be a parent because I have three. I have one who's about to be 25 next month, and she's done with college and grad school, whoop, whoop, right off the payroll. Then I have a second one who just finished Vanderbilt and just started grad school at NYU this week. She is very much on the payroll. Like we are counting down the days to get her done. And then I have a 9-year-old son in the 4th grade. We call that a uh-oh. That is a surprise, but I promise you it's not happening again, and if it does, somebody's getting sued because we shut that store down. It is closed. No, we can't do it again. And I love education so much. I married an educator, so my husband is an educator as well. So so that's a little bit about me. And as far as college, I went to college at Auburn, and I now serve on the board of trustees at Auburn University. That's not a good place to be after Saturday's game. And I also went to University of Alabama to law school, and I serve on the board of governors at the law school. So in the state of Alabama, that makes me interracial, right? I mean, I went to both schools, I serve on both boards. Nobody gets mad at me. So that's a little bit about me from a professional perspective. And also, as a lawyer, a part of my career, nearly 30 years now, I served as a Garnet Litem for abused and neglected kids. And when you're a Garnet Litem, for those of you who aren't familiar with what that is, they call them a GAL or whatever, it's a lawyer whenever a kid has been removed from a family or something traumatic has happened in their lives and they become a part of the family court system. Then the judge will appoint a Garnet Litem or GAL to represent just the kid. They don't represent mom and daddy, they don't represent DHR, they represent just the kid's interests. And so for 8 years of my legal career, I served as the Garnet Litem for abused and neglected kids. And over the years, I have seen everything you can imagine that's happened to kids. And it's to say it's a tug at your heartstrings to be able to play a role in that environment where kids are stuck in the middle, whether it's a terrible divorce, whether they've been sexually abused, whether parents are on drugs, whatever the circumstances, where adults have done something that have led us to having them in the system can be pretty strong. So let me tell you a story about a little girl. So both of her parents are drug dealers. They live in the housing projects. They're both drug dealers. There's 5 kids in the house. They have 4 different fathers, and the mother had given birth to them from age 16 to about 26, something like that. Dad got busted for dealing drugs, went to prison. While he was in prison, Mama was trying to hold down the drug business herself, but broke the rule of drug dealing, started using their product, heroin, became a heroin addict. So Mom ends up separating the kids, the 5 children, across the state, and went back to the housing project and committed suicide. And so the little girl was in the home with a grandma in the housing projects, another housing projects, and in that home she was sexually abused. She was in and out of foster homes because there was another uncle that was really violent, that physically abused them while they were there, and law enforcement would be called, and they'd have to go in and out of foster homes. So what would you think would happen to that little girl facing all that stuff? What do you think? psychological repercussions. What do you think?
I think she probably ended up in foster care.
Okay.
She needs a more stable.
What do you think would happen to a little girl? Sexually abused, mom committed suicide, dad in jail. She'd be traumatized, okay. What do you think with the pink purse? I love the pink purse, by the way. What do you think would happen?
I would say she would be just very traumatized, wouldn't know which way to look or no support, no guidance. She's,
What's her likely outcome? You can be honest. I mean, what do you think would happen? That's a lot of stuff.
anything can happen, like jail, anything. Like her mom committed suicide, maybe she doesn't have any support. She can do the same. Get support and, build her life and go on the right path. You never know.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm that little girl. So everything I just described to you was my childhood. All of those things happened to me, but I'm standing here today. Now I will say this, and I know there's separation of church and state and all of that. For me, I'm a person of faith. And so when you ask yourself, how in the world did you come from there to here? My response to you is just two simple words from Liz's perspective, and that is, but God. That is how. That is how a person who went through what I went through in my childhood can be standing here today, who I'm so committed to promoting the power of education because God literally used it to save my life. And when I say that, I'm not kidding. I'm not stretching anything when I say that. You just heard the basic background of my story and all of those things that I went through. And I respect whatever your faith walk is in your life. We live in a country that's built on that, that's built on the freedom for us to express ourselves however we choose to. But it's really difficult for me to tell my truth without talking about my God. So I say that this is Liz Huntley's story. This is my perspective, my background. But you can't help but know that whether you're a person of faith or not, you can't help but know that you believe in humanity and human beings, or you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here investing time in your own children, grandchildren, foster children, adoptive children, whatever has you sitting in these chairs right now with a baby out there playing. And they always do me so wrong. Every year I come here and I get distracted by all the pretty little babies out there, and I just want to go out there and play with them. But because this is such a beautiful place and the kids are so happy. But believe it or not, I was actually a happy little kid too. It's interesting because even though I was in this house where my parents were dealing drugs and all of this stuff, when you're a kid and Maslow's laws are being met, I had food, I had shelter, my mom and daddy were there, I didn't know what they were doing and all this stuff. My siblings, I loved them. I didn't give a flip that they had different daddies. I didn't even know they had different daddies. I didn't care. It was just my brother and my sister. I loved them. I was a happy-go-lucky little kid. I didn't know what was going down. That's why I get so mad when people judge children based on the decisions adults are making. It's so wrong because kids are just innocent kids. I remember bags of stuff being all over our table. I didn't know what was going on. I remember people coming and going in our house all the time. I thought we were just popular, right? Like we were the hangout house in the neighborhood. I had no idea why folks were rolling up into our house all the time. And I had all the toys I wanted. And, I was just a happy-go-lucky little kid. We had every gun known to man in that house. I remember guns being leaned against the wall in the corner, everywhere. I just knew I wasn't supposed to touch them. That was it. I was a kid. I was innocent. I didn't have a clue what was going on. But whenever you have that level of dysfunction, because that's a dangerous way to live, eventually something's going to happen, right? And that's what went down with my parents. My dad got busted. He went to prison. While he was in prison, she was trying to hold down the drug business herself and broke the cardinal rule of drug dealing and became a heroin addict. And then packed us up and took us to these different relatives' homes and went back and committed suicide. But at that point, I did know I was in dysfunction, because when dysfunction happens for children, it hits in such a harsh way. And dysfunction does not discriminate either. A lot of times we think dysfunction, we think poor, poverty, all of those kinds of things. When I was a guardian ad litem for abused and neglected kids in the state of Alabama for 8 years, I represented children from rural Alabama in dirt road trailer parks in rural Alabama to Mountain Brook. I had clients all the way across the spectrum. You know why? Dysfunction doesn't discriminate. Dysfunction don't care how much money you got. Dysfunction don't care what your education is. Dysfunction don't care what your job title is. Dysfunction is dysfunction is dysfunction. And dysfunction at this stage of your kid's life, any level of anxiety or anything going on, I want to talk to y'all about how critical it is, because I said to you guys that God used education to save my life. And I meant it. So as a lawyer, I get in front of juries all the time, and not all the time, but when we do have trials, I get in front of a jury and I make a statement to that jury. Those 12, 11 people have whatever the jury pool is. And when I make a statement to that jury, I can't just sit down, right? I can't just say what I want to prove and then just sit down. I have to give that jury what? What does the jury have to buy what I'm saying? Evidence. Who said it? Evidence. There we go. Should have been a lawyer. Where are you? So that jury has to have evidence. I can't just say something and sit down and expect them to go along with what my client's position is. So I told y'all that God used education to save my life. So let me break that down to you, and the power of what it is you're doing by allowing your children to be in this space this year. So I was 5 when all of that happened. Now I'm in my grandmother's house. I'm in a new place to live. I'm separated from my siblings. My mom's committed suicide. My dad's in and out of jail, not stepping up to the plate. I'm hunger insecure. My grandmother worked hard for a living. She was a courageous woman that left a violent marriage to raise her children in a safe environment. And she cleaned houses and did the best she could. But it was tight, so we had to have food assistance. And back then, food assistance was not, you get an EBT card and you get to go to the store like everybody else. Food assistance was standing in the line at the county department at the beginning of the month to get a bag of flour, box of cheese, all of that stuff. Now, by the way, I still stand on that cheese. That government cheese slapped, didn't it? It was the real deal. If any of you ever experienced, you know what I'm talking about. I see some nodding back there. I would buy it today. But so, you know, here I was in this situation where everything you could think could go wrong. And I remember when I wrote my book, More Than a Bird, I went back to my neighborhood and I interviewed some of the ladies that would have known me back then, because I wanted to know what was I like when all that stuff happened. So I went back, and I'll never forget, Miss Polly kind of summed it up. She said, baby, she said, it was so sad. She said, it was really pitiful. You took your mama's death hard. She said, you walked around all slumped over all the time. You hung your head. It's like you went into a shell. You wouldn't talk to folks. Sometimes you just mumbled when you talked and all of this stuff. What Miss Polly did not know that was going on also at that time was that within a month of me moving into that house with my grandmother, one of her young adult sons started sexually abusing me on a regular basis. So when I tell you, I know what darkness is like. I know what darkness is like. And so she said I wouldn't make eye contact with folk. I mumbled when I talked. They used to have to tell me to speak up. And then she said, but baby, after a while, you just snapped out of it. She said, you just snapped out of it and you started doing so well in school and you got a scholarship to Auburn, then you went to law school and now you're a lawyer. She said, baby, we're so proud of you. Well, I'm here to tell y'all there is no way, and I know this from my years of working and studying childhood trauma as a guardian ad litem, that kids at that age do not have the ability to just snap out of it. You don't have the ability to process that much trauma and just go on about your business and function and be normal. It takes intervention. It takes something really powerful to be able to intervene and help a kid through that. And so if I wasn't going through enough at this stage, we were also going through integration in my neighborhood at the time, down in Chilton County, Alabama, where I was living, where I live today. And tensions were high in our neighborhood, just like everywhere else in the South during that time. And there were these ladies just like a friend I know, that said, you know what? We want to make sure our kids are ready to go to school when they go across town. So we're going to open up a preschool, a little kindergarten preschool. So these ladies, they weren't educators themselves. They went and got a community action grant. They partnered with the Union Baptist Church right there in my community to use their fellowship hall. And they hired some of the black teachers that lost their jobs in integration, and they opened up this preschool right there in our community, and it was free of charge. Now, you have to know my grandma to know I was going to go to that preschool. Now, I don't know if y'all know some old matriarchs in your family, them old grandmamas. You know, there were 4 things about her that she never said, but we just understood. Number 1, church every Sunday. Door open, we were there. Number 2, mind your elders. I can assure you DHR would have had her arrested if they knew how she made us mind our elders. She was old school now, she didn't play. Number 3, you were clean. We may have lived in the housing projects, but you could have eaten off our floor. My grandma had a saying, she said, clean don't cost a dime. Anybody can be clean. And number 4, she believed in an education. Clearly you do too. You understand the value of it and the importance of it. It was something she didn't have an opportunity to have. So it was very important to her, for her children and now her grandchildren, to get an education. So she heard about this preschool and knew I was of age to go and told me, Elizabeth, you're going to that preschool. Yes, ma'am. So what I have described to you that Miss Polly said I was like back then is exactly how I remember myself being. I literally remember the morning of going down to that preschool, and our little community was so small, everybody knew everybody's business. I was literally ashamed of my whole situation, because everybody knew my mama had been a drug addict and committed suicide. Everybody knew my daddy was in and out of jail. Everybody knew that we were so dirt poor the kids made fun of us. And even though I had not told anybody about the sexual abuse at the time, let me tell you something about a kid that's being sexually abused. You feel like people know. You feel like you got this stamp on your forehead and they know the terrible, vile stuff going on in your home. It is a terrible, terrible feeling. And that was my condition walking down to that school. And I remember when I got there, I'll never forget this. I walk up to the door and there was a gentleman there named Mr. Willie. Mr. Willie was a deacon of the church and he was retired. And he had volunteered his time, probably knowing those ladies probably voluntold that he was going to make sure that the kids got safely across the intersection of the church. So Mr. Willie's standing there. He's not an educator or anything, but when I walk up to that door, scared, frightened, cortisol levels high in my body, fight or flight, all of those things that go on with the kid when they're nervous, I walk up to the door and Mr. Willie looks at me and he says, "Well, hello, young lady, welcome." Now, that stuff some of y'all may do to kids that you see all the time. But this morning, I'm here to talk to you guys from behind the eyes of a child, and what a child experiences when they go into an environment that literally leads the way for this development at this most critical point in their life, like your children that are here today. So when he said that, it was kind of like everything calmed down, because the first person I see at the building, they're nice to me and they're friendly, and so it calmed down a little bit. Well, then I walk on into the fellowship hall. I don't know what to do. It was just a big open room. I remember standing there looking over the room, and I kind of smile. And the reason I kind of smile is because the room was so beautiful to me. I mean, yes, I had a clean, squeaky clean housing project home. Could have eaten off the floor. But it was so clean, I'm gonna take some of y'all back. Y'all remember folks that were so clean they put plastic on the sofas? Y'all know what I'm talking about? That's how it was in my house. You know, there were no toys, there were no stimulating things for kids in the house. It was just a nice, clean home. But I get in there and they got little bitty desks that are just my size and little bitty workstations, and it's bright and colorful. So I kind of smiled. You see this little girl walking in there and seeing all of that stuff and smiling? Because y'all know how elementary and preschool teachers are. I mean, you give those folks $25 and a pack of construction paper and you got Disney World, right? I don't know how they do it. It blows my mind. And don't let them have access to a Dollar Tree. It's over, right? You got a whole theme park. And they turn these spaces into this magical space for kids. Well, I'm talking to you about it from behind the eyes of a child. It makes you smile. You're going to get to be there all day, right? But when those kindergarten teachers came up to me and they put their arm around me and they got down close to my face and they looked me in my eye and they called me by my name in such a loving way, I almost cried. Because for the first time in my little fragile life, I felt the nurturing touch of an adult and I melted under it. I literally did. My grandmother was dealt a bad hand in life, and she was a tough taskmaster. There was not a lot of nurturing going on at home. When I heard my name, it was, Elizabeth, clean up the dishes. Elizabeth, go to bed. Elizabeth, do this. Elizabeth, do that. And nowadays, for some kids, they don't even hear their name. They hear, boy, get out of here. Girl, go do this, whatever. You know, and I'm not talking about any type of home. I'm talking all types of homes. I work with children and schools and kids all over this country. And kids are starving just for somebody to call their name in a nice way, not in a command or an order or whatever, just to ask them how their day is going. I know with my son, I always ask him, what was the most favorite part of your day today? Because then that starts him to talking about his day, because I want him to know I care about what was important to him. You know, just what was the most favorite part of your day? Sometimes it was just because they had Kona ice. He ain't thinking about the learning, right? But he's starting to open up to me and share, but I'm calling by his name. AJ, tell me about your day. What was the favorite part of your day today? You know, that conversation. I'm telling y'all about this from behind the eyes of a child. It wasn't until I got to that school that all of a sudden I heard my name in this nice way. And they would look me in my eyes and call me by. Those are the good practices of good early childhood preschool practices, like what you get here at PeSchool Partners. It's that type of stuff that we know in science that has been practiced over and over again, the impact it has on the child. I'm just telling y'all from behind the eyes of a child how impactful it is. So they call me by my name, they look me in the eye. Everything about that school was nurturing, everything about it. And they challenged me to learn. You would be amazed at what kids can learn at this age. They are like sponges. You would be amazed. And if you wonder whether or not they're too little or you know, they don't need to really start in structured school, I'm having reservations about this, all you need to do is just go online and look at what kids are expected to know by kindergarten. Because it is a lot. There's an expectation in our public school system for kids to know a lot by the time they go to kindergarten. So for them to be able to come into a place like PeSchool Partners and have this structured setting that's pouring into them, for them to be ready for school is a game changer. It was for me. Now, here's what happened in that school. I started to learn really quick that if you do really smart stuff, those ladies would really love on you. Like, and if you did really, really smart stuff, like all those worksheets and things, they would give you prizes and stuff that you could take home. So I thought, well, this is a good gig, right? All I got to do is all this academic worksheet stuff, and they're going to love on me and give me prizes. Well, I ended up doing so much smart stuff that I ended up being valedictorian of my kindergarten class. And I wasn't trying to be top of my class. I really wasn't. I was just responding to the love from those teachers in that building. I was responding to their expectations about my ability and what I was capable of doing. I didn't know any better. I was responding to them. And in doing so, I walked into that school, this broken down, withdrawn child, and I walked out of there with a smile on my face and a valedictorian medallion around my neck. And here's the clicker. Not one single thing changed in my house. Here's what's so powerful about preschool. A child can be going through all kinds of things at home, things you don't even know they're going through. You might be providing them the perfect environment, all the resources. They could be emotionally going through something that they haven't opened up to talk to you about it or whatever. But the power of the consistent intervention of a school is amazing, because we know this in science. We know that when kids are going through things at this critical stage, when up to 95% of their brain is going to be developed. Y'all realize you're in the brain development window? From birth to 7, 95% of your child's brain is going to be developed. Now, what's so critical about that is if something's happening that's disrupting the growth of that brain, it could cause permanent damage. So we know this in science. We know that children, when they're going through traumas, if they experience 4 or more traumas, the negative power of those traumas can be so powerful that it can actually stunt the growth of the frontal cortex of the brain. Now y'all are like, well, Miss Liz, you lost us. You're getting into all this science stuff. Let me just break it down like this. The frontal cortex of your brain, that's your executive function. If this room were to catch on fire, every decision that we make from the second we realize it's on fire, all happens right here. This is where you self-regulate, where you process stuff. It all happens right here. So when a child is going through a bunch of traumas, seen or unseen, it can actually be so powerful that it can stunt the growth of the frontal cortex of the brain. That's why I get really upset when I'll be in a school and I'll hear a teacher yelling at a kid saying, "What is wrong with you?" when they might ought to ask, "What happened to you?" Children are products of their experiences. And so when these negative things happen, it affects the growth of the frontal cortex of the brain. And sometimes that damage is permanent. And you have a child that can't self-regulate. They can't calm down. They don't know how to have control. They don't know how to process information. All of that can happen because of that. And it happens during this critical preschool age phase, because that's when this organ up there is actually doing its development right now. As they're playing on that playground, all of that's happening right at this time. And so because that trauma can do that, it can affect a child. And when it does, we start to see it in a kid. Let me tell you some of the signs. Kid will become withdrawn. Kids start to lose their posture and walk slumped over. Kid doesn't make eye contact. They kind of go into a shell. Some of them mumble when they talk. Some of them don't talk at all. They become completely mute. Am I describing a child to y'all? That's exactly how those ladies described me before I went to that preschool. So all of that trauma was starting to have that effect on the development of my brain. Everything was happening exactly as it would happen had it not been for this. There was no magical pill anybody could have given me. Man hadn't figured that out yet. We can't solve the adverse effects of trauma on a child by giving them a pill. There was no even magical therapy, and I'm a person who believes in science and believes in therapy. But at that time, there's no therapy you can give a child going through those things without some type of intervention. There's only one thing that we know for sure in science that will not only stop that negative neurology from affecting the frontal cortex of the brain, it can reverse the damage that's been done. We know in science that you can take that same child, like me, and you can place them in what scientists call a nurturing environment, what I call a place of love. Love is happening in this building. I call it what it is. You can place that same child in that environment, and the power of exposure to that environment will not only stop that negative neurology from happening, but it will reverse it. Isn't that powerful? So when I say that God used education to save my life, I mean it. And science backs me up. Because the buffering power of a nurturing environment like a powerful preschool, it's everything. A lot of times, we think, well, if I keep them home, I'm gonna love on them and all of those kinds of things. But when you put all of that learning, socialization with other kids, structure behind them, getting them ready for school, it is a powerful, powerful thing. So making a choice to send your child to a quality preschool program, you're the heroes today. You're the goat parents, because you get it. You get that this is so important. And for kids like me, it was everything, because without it, I wouldn't be here today. Now, let me tell you the beauty of what happens when a kid gets exposure to that like I did. I remember I got up for the first day of school, for public school. No offense to some of y'all in the room, but to meet white folks for the first time. I ain't know nothing about white people. I was like, they just like colored people. I don't know what's going on. So I'm a little nervous, and I get up and I eat my breakfast. I'm 6 years old, getting ready to go to public school to first grade. And my grandma looks at me and she says, Elizabeth, I want you to go over to that school and I want you to tell the teacher to put an X everywhere I need to sign on the paperwork, send it home, and I'll send it back tomorrow. So it dawned on me, my grandma is about to send me to this school by myself. In the middle of integration, at 6 years old, I was terrified, but I was more scared of my grandma. So I got my butt on that bus to go across town because she didn't play. You got to pick your poison, right? So I head to the bus stop. And I'm there, and my little community, y'all, was so small that all the kids from first grade to 12th grade rode the same bus. And then the bus would just take us to each school and drop us off. So I get to the bus stop, all the big kids are picking on the little kids and all of this stuff. I am so nervous, I'm 6. So as I'm getting up on the bus, never forget, the bus driver was a white male school teacher, middle school teacher and coach named Mr. Jerry Fulford. And as I was getting up on the bus, he looked at me and he said, now you sit right back here by me. He didn't have to do that. But when you're in a good school setting and people are loving your kids and taking care of your kids, those kinds of things happen. And so I kind of calmed down. He let me sit up there by him because I was scared to go to the back of that bus. So I get to the school, and this is the power of what you're setting your kids up for. I get to the school and I don't know what to do. You're not going to be with them all the time. They're going to have to make decisions on their own. They're going to have to figure things out on their own. Maybe not as early as I did in life, but they are. And the tools that they have with them will mean everything. So I get into the school. I don't know what to do. I'm scared to death. But I look on the wall and I see first grade. And I think to myself, well, I'm going to the first grade. I must be in the right place. Well, how did I know it said first grade? I didn't have any learning going on in my home. Because of that preschool, I was school ready. And I knew it said first grade. So I stood there a little longer. Parents were coming in with their kids, and there were all these pieces of paper on the wall. And they would scroll down the list, and they'd find their child's name and say, oh, little Susie, you're in such and such room. And they'd go off into the module. Well, I thought to myself, well, my name's got to be up there. I'm going to the first grade. So I got on my tippy toes and I scrolled up and down the list until I found my name. I saw what room number I was supposed to go into, and I headed that way. Well, how did I know how to read and spell my name? How did I know what a room number was? How did I know how to navigate from room to room? Because of that preschool, I was school ready. So I get into the room, I don't know what to do, but I sat in the front center desk. And I sat in the front center desk because Miss Leora and the ladies at the kindergarten told me, don't nothing good happen in the back of the classroom. When you get your butt over there, you better sit in the front desk. So I could literally hear them saying that to me in my head. And so I went and I sat down in the front desk. I didn't know what to do. It's the first day of school. It is chaos. It doesn't matter if you're black or white, rich or poor. Everybody's nervous. It's the first day of school. And I'll never forget, I remember it was just chaos in the room. There was this guy named Philip. He was in the corner just crying. Y'all, I know Philip today. He's still whining. There was this girl, Christy Foshi, that didn't want to let go of her doll. It was the first time because it's first grade. That was the first day of school. Everybody's nervous. There was that parent talking to the teacher at the front of the class. Y'all know that parent that think their kid the only one in the room, and they take up all the teacher's time. So all that's going on. And I'm just sitting there. I guess I'm just sitting up straight waiting on class to start. Well, it seemed like an eternity had passed, but eventually the teacher started walking towards me. Now, guys, this is in the early 70s, and we didn't have but 3 stations back then, and you watch what was on TV. So this lady is walking towards me, and she looks just like Wonder Woman. I am not kidding y'all. She looked like Wonder Woman. And I'm not talking about the new Wonder Woman. I'm talking about Linda Carter, the Wonder Woman. Y'all can think what you want to with this 1984 thing, but there's only one real Wonder Woman. And back in those days, the Wonder Woman show was on TV. And as a little child, I used to think in my mind, one day Wonder Woman was going to come with the rope and the cuffs and save me from the bad folks, right? It was going to go down. So this lady starts walking towards me looking just like Wonder Woman, and I think in my little 6-year-old mind, could this be? Is my teacher Wonder Woman? Like, how cool would that have been? Well, it wasn't Wonder Woman, it was Miss Pam Jones. But she was my Wonder Woman, because let me tell you what happened next. This is the marriage of being ready, school ready, to being in a school and what happens. So Miss Pam Jones walked up to me, and she said, well, hello, young lady, what is your name? Y'all, I panicked. I didn't know anything about registering myself for school. So all that could come out of my mouth was, my name is Elizabeth Humphrey, and my grandma told me to tell you to put an X everywhere she needs to sign on the paperwork, send it back home, and I'll send it back tomorrow. I just spit it out. I had rehearsed it over and over again. That's what my grandma said I had to say when I got to school. So I just spit it out. And Miss Pam Jones paused, and we had a conversation about how I found my way into that room. Now, you all know a lot of things could have happened in that moment. Miss Pam Jones could have said, I'm calling DHR. I can't believe somebody would send this kid to school. And God rest my grandmother's soul, I will love that woman to the day that I die. But she was wrong to send me to school that day by myself. Miss Pam Jones could have said, I don't have time to fool with this. You need to go to the guidance counselor's office and let them figure out what to do about this situation. That kind of would have been fair. She had a lot going on. Or she could have done the worst thing that could have happened to me. She could have been one of those educators that brought their personal bias with them into the classroom and decided that I was one of those children and just dismissed me, and I would have become invisible. That would have been the worst thing that could have happened to me. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about race. I'm talking about people having biases against kids because of who their siblings were, or their family folk, or what neighborhood they live in. Folks have biases. And she could have been one of those folks, but she wasn't. Instead, she was an incredible educator that assessed that situation when I told her what I had done, and she determined that my glass was actually half full, not half empty. Because what she saw was a brave child. What she saw was a resilient child. What she saw was a child with a lot of potential. And in seeing that, with tears in her eyes, Miss Pam Jones leaned down close to my face and said, Elizabeth Humphrey, you're going to be the brightest student I ever have. Oh, the power of education. But that was the marriage of being prepared from preschool and then meeting with school and a good teacher. It's so powerful. I will remember that moment for the rest of my life. And that moment would not have happened had I not been school ready. It really equipped me with not just the academic things, but the character that's being built in children when they're in a preschool. The things the resilience, the thinking through things, the learning how to cooperate with your classmates, all of those things are critically important to the success of school when you go there. And I had those things with me. Now, I'll be honest, I thought it was a little weird that the lady was about to cry, like, what is wrong with her, right? But then I thought to myself, I was only 6. I thought to myself, well, I guess this is like preschool too, right? If I do smart stuff for her, she's gonna love on me too, right? That's how this works. And that's what I did. And by the time I left first grade, I was reading on a 4th and 5th grade level. And I was doing math on a 2nd and 3rd grade level. And here's the clicker, once again, nothing changed in my house. See, school didn't fix anything for me. They didn't fix what I was going through, but the tools that I got from school helped me through it. What you're doing by letting your children come to PreSchool Partners and be a part of this preschool experience, you're equipping them with the tools that they need for life to navigate. This is their world. Their world will be school. and being with other kids and learning to tap into what their potential is, what God has uniquely equipped them with to contribute to society. And it is so important that it happens in a place with good practices where they can thrive and have those things built in them, like I did in the preschool that I attend, like I know that happens here at PreSchool Partners. You are so blessed to be sitting here today and your children have access to this experience. It is a game changer. I'm telling you, it is everything. Now, I will say this, that lady, Miss Pam Jones, she is still loving on me to this day. When I gave birth to my second child, she was at my house keeping my first child. And even when I gave birth to that little caboose surprise, she was the first person to hold him in the nursery. She might have been there because she was like, I want to see this for myself. Did she just have a baby at her age? But she was then and always will be my Wonder Woman. Educators are like superheroes, the things that they're able to provide your children to equip them. It's a partnership, right? Because when you think about it, when I speak to educators all over this country, I normally will show them a graph when we think about the power of a school on a child's life. A lot of times we just think about the instructional hours. And if you look at instructional hours, kids are in school anywhere between 150 to 180 something hours a year. But I want you to think of it a little differently than just the instructional hours, like I tell other educators and parents when I talk to them. When your child is enrolled in school, everything about school affects their life, doesn't it? It's different than summer, right? When they're in school, there's structure, there's routine, there's expectation of something good. There's all those things around school that affects a child. So I really believe that school affects a child 270 plus days out of the year, from September to June or May or whenever they go, because it's a part of their life. When I wrote my book, More Than a Bird, the book is actually written on a 6th grade level, which means all of y'all can read it, right? So it's written on a 6th grade level because I wrote the book for kids. I wrote my story and told about my journey because I wanted every child to know, no matter what your situation is, if it's a good situation, this is how grateful you should be. If it's a bad situation, you need to understand that you can make it through it as long as you go to school. Because there's got to be some adult in the building that cares about kids. I'm married to an educator. I know they don't do it to get rich, because we ain't gonna get rich off of what my husband makes every month as an educator. But I can't imagine him doing anything else, because it's his calling on his life for him to do it and all the kids that he's impacted. So it's a partnership with the school, and to pick the right place for them to get that is everything, and you couldn't pick a better place than PreSchool Partners. Now, I would be remiss, since you all are going to read the book, More Than a Bird, and it just is a story of all these community leaders, educators, coaches, pastors, people that poured into my life at all these different points in my life, if I didn't tell you why I named the book More Than a Bird. I'll close with that, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. But when I was in the 3rd grade, I'll never forget this. At this point, this is when things had gotten really bad, because in addition to the sexual abuse and hunger insecurity and all of that kind of stuff, this is when foster care was introduced, because my grandmother had an uncle who was mentally ill. He had been discharged from the military. Nobody knows what happened to him. And I don't know if y'all ever seen that person in the community that walks around talking to themselves, doing all of this erratic stuff and all of that. That was my Uncle Tim. That's how he was. And we were in the housing projects there in West End and Clanton, and everybody would make fun of him and all this stuff. But he had been in the military, and nobody knew what happened to him. And when he came home, my grandmother's her son, so she had to take care of him. And so she's trying to juggle keeping his meds straight and having her grandchildren and all this stuff going on. And he would get off his medication on his own, like he would just not take it or whatever. And when that would happen, he would get very violent. And when I say violent, I'm talking so violent that police would be called. And when that would happen, sometimes we'd have to go to foster care. So things had really gotten bad in terms of just the chaos and everything that I was dealing with. And I'll never forget, I remember getting on the bus for the last day of school. And as I got on the bus and the school was fading in the distance, as the bus drove off, I started to cry. And I didn't just cry, I wept. I wept because I was leaving the one place where no adults hurt me. I was leaving the one place where my mind was stimulated to learn. I was leaving the one place where I knew I'd get a meal. I was leaving the one place where I actually felt like my age. I work with a lot of children in this country, and a lot of them are treated like adults at home. And I felt like my age. And so for me to get on that bus and know I wasn't going to come back to after Labor Day, that was 10 weeks that I was going to be in my reality every day, 24/7. And I cried. I wept. And so I went into like this depression. If you don't believe a little kid can go into a depression, you need to think again. They can. And I remember going into like this depression. Well, 2 weeks after that, my Aunt Liz invited me to this church with her. And I'm being honest, I didn't go because I wanted to learn about God. I went because it got me out of my house at night, on a Wednesday night, when the bad stuff happens. So we go to this little church and I sit down, and the very first thing the preacher said is, okay, I want everybody to get out your Bibles, and if you don't have one will be provided to you. Well, that was different. Nobody had ever asked me to read a Bible before, but because of school I could read, and I could read well. And thank goodness I could read well. They gave me a King James version of the Bible, brother. So they give me this Bible, and we're reading through all these stories, and I start to experience something I'd never experienced before, this thing called hope. Because we're reading about this God that had helped all these people overcome all of these things. And we ended that night in the book of Genesis with the story of Joseph. Now, you people of faith out there know about the story of Joseph. That's the coat of many colors story, right? And let's put it in modern day context, right? So, I mean, that story could be a whole Netflix series, right? Because you got 10 boys. They have 3 or 4 different baby mamas. 2 of the baby mamas are sisters, and they all live in the same house. Y'all, that's a hot mess, isn't it? And then he's the baby of the sister he really wanted to marry. And so Joseph's daddy buys him this coat of many colors. He's strutting around in his little coat. And then those boys get so jealous of that boy that they plot to kill him. But they end up not killing him, and they sold him into slavery. And then this boy's in prison. But at the end of that beautiful story, God had elevated Joseph as governor of Egypt. And in that capacity, not only did he save his family from famine and starvation, he saved 2 nations from famine and starvation. And whether you're a person of faith or not, let me tell you, my ability to read and understand and process that stuff at that moment in time was everything. Because faith started to come into my heart. And then I left that night, and all I could think about was that Bible, those stories of hope, and I could read it and understand it. And I got back the next Wednesday, and we went through several scriptures, and we ended in Matthew 6:26. And I'll paraphrase. It says that if God will take care of the fowls of the air, and they neither sow nor reap, then he'll take care of his children. Aren't they better than a bird? Right? Now, here was the tragedy in that moment. And y'all be patient with me, because every time I get here, it is always really hard to talk through it. Because the tragedy in that moment is I sat there and I struggled with whether or not I was more than a bird. Because to me, it seemed like the birds had it better than I did. But then the pastor said this. He said, you know that you're more than a bird because God will send people to love you. He will send people to love you even when the folks aren't doing what they're supposed to do in your life. And when he said that, it was like a light bulb went off in me. Because in that moment, all I could think about was my school. All I could think about was the one place where people did love and nurture me. And because of that, whether you're a person of faith or not, you gotta understand the humanity in that moment, the power of it. Because of that, faith came into my heart that night, and I professed Christ as my Savior. And I learned how to live my life through the Word of God. And I stayed on my natural journey using education, the great equalizer, the great opportunity, as a place to develop a good quality of life here on earth. And from preschool to law school, God always sent people like Miss Layla and them to love me. Always. It's powerful. Making the right decision about who you're entrusting your babies to is everything. And in some cases, like me, it saved my life. It did. It is a powerful, powerful thing. So I want to thank you this morning. I want to thank you on behalf of your children, however they landed in your lap, whether you gave birth to them, whether you fathered them, whether you're grandmama, whether you're foster parent, whether you're adopted parent, however they're yours. And you made a wonderful choice in putting them in a great place with some of the best practices in this country on making sure they'll have what they need to be school ready. So thank you, thank you, thank you for loving your kids in that way. Thank you so much. Thank you.